All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Florida College Access webinar, Busting the Affordability Barrier, What You Need to Know About This Year's Florida FAFSA Challenge. I'll be your host today. I'm Amy Bolick, and I'm Florida College Access Network's statewide programs coordinator. You can see my contact information there. During the webinar, you'll be able to submit your questions and conversation via the chat box. And you can also continue this conversation on social media. You can tweet at FCAN at FL College Access. And the hashtags we use for these initiatives are hashtag CollegeReadyFL and hashtag FAFSAFL. I'm also happy to be joined today by two other presenters. My colleague Kimberly Lent will be speaking today. She is our Senior Research Associate, and she's going to share information about the FAFSA Challenge Dashboard. And we'll also be joined by Ralph Aiello, who is the Director of School Counseling and BRACE for Broward County School District. And he's going to be talking about how Broward County has embraced the Florida FAFSA Challenge and adapted it for Broward County's unique circumstances. Now, we were excited to see when we were looking at the registrations that for many of you, this is your first FCAN webinar. So I want to give you a little bit of background on Florida College Access Network for those of you who might not be familiar with it. At FCAN, our mission is to create and strengthen a statewide network that catalyzes and supports communities to improve college and career readiness, access, and completion for all students. And our vision is that by the year 2025, at least 60% of all working age Floridians will hold a high quality post-secondary degree or credential. And what we mean by that term, high quality post-secondary degree or credential, is that we're not just talking about bachelor's degrees, but we're also talking about associate's degrees and technical certificates, any kind of credential that prepares students for life in the workforce. At FCAN, we accomplish our goal in three main ways. The first is through local college access networks, or LCANs. And LCANs are geographic networks that bring together partners and communities to put forward college access goals in that community. And these can be made up of business partners, education partners, nonprofits. And currently, 75% of the state's population is covered and served by a local college access network. So you can see there in the green on the map, that's where we have LCANs right now. So if you see your area in green, you can see the LCAN that serves you. And if you don't see your area in green, that's something that we can maybe talk about and connect with further about how we can bring an LCAN to your area. FCAN also does research, data, and policy work. We work to produce student-centered research and policy analysis. We serve as a clearinghouse for college and career access and completion data. And we also work to develop local, state, and national partnerships and policy alignment so that we can advocate for certain policies that promote student success. And finally, the part of our work that I am in charge of is our statewide initiatives. And currently, our three statewide initiatives are all under the banner of College Ready Florida, and these are Apply Yourself Florida, the Florida FAFSA Challenge, and Florida College Decision Day. And just briefly, Apply Yourself Florida is a college application week event where students have time and space during the school day to complete their college applications. The Florida FAFSA Challenge is where we encourage districts and schools to take on the goal of improving FAFSA completion by 5% over the previous year. And finally, Florida College celebrates the post-secondary decisions that students have made. But without any further ado, we are here today to talk primarily about the Florida FAFSA Challenge. So the Florida FAFSA Challenge is the challenge that we have going on right now. It began on October 1st and ends on March 31st. And it began in October thanks to this is the second year that we'll have the FAFSA opening in October. And even though students can continue completing their FAFSAs after March 31st, we end the challenge at that date to encourage early FAFSA completion. And this is because financial aid is distributed on a first-come, first-served basis. So if students apply for financial aid earlier, they're more likely to get the full amount of aid that they qualify for. This is the third year that we're running the Florida FAFSA Challenge, and we're excited to say that we have 290 schools registered in 37 counties. That's a 75% increase over last year's registration, and it's also the first time we've had more than half of all of Florida's counties participating in the challenge. Now, what the challenge is that we ask every school or community that participates to adopt the goal of increasing FAFSA completion in their area by 5% over the previous year. And we also, as part of the challenge, we award trophies and certificates to folks who achieve certain levels of FAFSA completion. So the winners categories that we have this year are MVP, and that is the schools and communities that reach the highest level overall of FAFSA completion. Most improved is the schools and communities that have the highest % increase over the previous year. And the 50-50 Club is a new category that we've introduced this year. And that is for schools that have 50% or more of their students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, who reach 50% or more of their students completing the FAFSA by March 31st. And the top winners and the top achievers in each of those categories will be recognized at our summit at a special luncheon with one of those nifty looking trophies that you can see over there on the side. And then also we have certificates for everyone who is a FAFSA champion, and that's any school or community that achieves the 5% increase over the previous year. So when it comes to FAFSA completion and the FAFSA Challenge, schools, FCANs, and community partners and other kinds of organizations can all host FAFSA completion events. And we see a lot of our partners across the state combining FAFSA completion with other college access and readiness efforts. For example, the pictures that you see here on this slide are from a high school here in Hillsborough County, Bloomingdale High School, where they had a college application event, and they also included resources for the students there to help them complete their FAFSA if there were students there who had already completed their applications early. So we have resources available at Florida College Access Network to help you put on these kind of events, financial aid nights, FAFSA labs, to help students with completing their applications. And as you're helping students complete their FAFSAs, in some instances, you're going to run across some common problems that students might encounter. And so I just want to address two of those really quick. The first is with FAFSA submission versus completion. If you have access to student level data, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, the student level data can show college access professionals and counselors whether students in their school have submitted the FAFSA or completed it. And getting those students from submitted to completed is a great way to boost your FAFSA completion rates. So from the United States Department of Ed, they've identified 3 of the most common reasons that a FAFSA would be listed as submitted rather than completed, and those include parent or student signatures missing from the FAFSA or the web application. For dependent students, if the Social Security number, date of birth, or last name is missing for one or both of their parents, that would prevent a FAFSA from being completed. And also missing the marital status and or the number of family members, the household size could be a factor. So since these are common areas that cause a FAFSA to not be completed, if you're working with students on helping them complete their FAFSAs, you want to make sure to double check all these areas to make sure they got all of those to help avoid more students having incomplete FAFSAs. Another issue that we've heard about from partners across the state and across the country is with FAFSA verification. Now, in a normal FAFSA year, the federal government flags about 1/3 of FAFSAs for verification. And what this means is that when a student is flagged for verification, they have to verify the income they reported on their FAFSA with all of the schools they applied to and want to receive a financial aid package from. And they cannot receive a financial aid report from that school until they complete this auditing procedure. This year, however, instead of 1/3 of students being flagged, according to the National College Access Network, a recent article from the Washington Post, and to some partners we've spoken with across the state, students are being flagged at abnormally high rates for verification. Now, it's our understanding that the federal government is aware of this problem and that it's an algorithm issue and that they're working on fixing it, but some of your students who have already completed their FAFSAs early might have run into this problem and so need help with verification. And we also don't know for sure when this is going to be fixed. So we wanted to make sure that you had the resources to know how to help students when they are flagged for verification. So how do you know if your student has been flagged for verification? Unfortunately, the only way you can know that is by looking at their student aid report, which gets sent directly to the student. So even if you have access to student level data, their FAFSA is going to be listed as completed rather than submitted or completed with errors, because it is completed with the federal government. There's just extra verification that has to go on with the institution. So if you have access to the student aid report, or you can teach your students how to look for this on their report themselves, what they will see on the report is next to the expected family contribution, or the EFC, there will be an asterisk next to that number. And if that asterisk appears on their student aid report, that means they've been flagged for verification. Some students might also see a C next to their EFC number, and a C next to that number means that they've been flagged for citizenship. Some students get concerned when they see this, but it's our understanding that it's fairly common for students who applied for citizenship in the last 5 years to be flagged for verification of their citizenship. So to walk students through the verification process, they will have to complete a verification worksheet with every school they're applying to or every school that they want to receive financial aid information from. And in order to complete that verification sheet, they're going to need some tax documents from the IRS. So students and parents will have to request a copy of their tax return transcript. And if the student or the parents, for whatever reason, didn't file taxes the year in question, most students haven't filed taxes for that year, but in some cases the parents didn't file taxes either, they'll need to get a verification of non-filing letter. Now, typically, these documents cost around $50 to order from the IRS, but students and parents can use the disaster designation, Florida Hurricane Irma, to waive that fee and get a free copy of those documents. To verify their income with the schools, the students do not need to send the originals. They can send copies, or they can just copy down on their verification worksheet the information from those documents. So make sure that students know not to send the documents directly to the schools, but rather to have the documents sent to them so that they can make copies or put that information on the worksheets so that they can do their verification with multiple schools that they're applying to. Okay, so I also want to make you guys familiar with some of the resources that are available throughout the state to help you with your FAFSA completion efforts. The first set of resources are through the Office of Student Financial Assistance, or OSFA. And I mentioned a couple of times access to student level data. And there are several communities throughout the state that have a data sharing agreement with the Office of Student Financial Assistance. And this agreement allows them to get access to data for specific students on whether they've submitted their FAFSAs, completed them with errors, etc. So if you want to know whether you have that data sharing agreement, you can talk to the school district level folks in your community, or you can contact Jan Smith directly at jansmith@fldoe.org. OSFA also has a speakers bureau this year, and what that is they have relationships with financial aid experts throughout the state. So if you're having a financial aid night or a FAFSA lab, you can contact OSFA and they will connect you with a speaker in your area who will come to your event and will deliver a financial aid presentation. They also have their basic financial aid presentation available online in an overview video that you can use. If you have someone, if you or someone at your organization or your school wants to learn how to deliver that financial aid presentation yourselves, they have a train the trainer session to help you do that. And they also have FAFSA lab training available. And a FAFSA lab is basically schools invite students and parents to come in, sit at computers, and complete their FAFSAs with the help of volunteers, and they have training to help you learn how to set up one of those events. Florida College Access Network also has some resources available to help you with your FAFSA activities. The first is the FAFSA Completion Toolkit, which is available in the handouts at the end of this webinar. You can also access the toolkit at the link below, floridacollegeaccess.org, about the Florida FAFSA Challenge. And this toolkit includes some outreach and promotion strategies for your FAFSA events. And it also has a long appendix with FAFSA resources from around the web that is very helpful. We have live right now the FAFSA First Look Data Dashboard, which includes the FAFSA completion numbers from across the state. We don't have the FAFSA completion rates yet because we're still waiting on enrollment data. But when we do have those FAFSA completion rates, we'll have the FAFSA Florida Challenge Data Dashboard, where you can track your FAFSA completion rates and compare it to last year. And fortunately, we have one of the brains behind the FAFSA dashboards with us today, Kimberly, to talk about those in more detail. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to her so that she can talk about those resources.
Thanks, Amy. So before we talk about the dashboard, we are going to go through what's new for this FAFSA season. The first is that we now have data from the U.S. Department of Education that includes students up to age 19. Some of you may recall that in previous FAFSA cycles, we only had data that included first-time in college students up to age 18. And when this was available, many of our partners reached out and said that our FAFSA data dashboard did not accurately reflect the hard work that they were doing in their schools. So because of all of this feedback, we were able to go to the Florida Department of Education to request data about the number of students that might be potentially impacted by the reporting criteria that the USDO was using. And we found that approximately 20 to 25% of high school seniors were left out of this FAFSA completion data. With that in mind, we were able to reach out to the folks at the U.S. Department of Ed to let them know how this may be disproportionately impacting Florida students. And thankfully, they listened to us, so we now have more students included in the weekly FAFSA data that is downloaded from the U.S. Department of Education. With that in mind, we do want to send a nice shout out to all of our partners and thank them for the work they did to let us know about this issue, and the USDO for making the data more inclusive to all students. The second update is that this is the second year that FAFSA has been opened in October. And as many of you may recall again, historically the FAFSA has opened in January, and last year was the first year that it opened in October. And ultimately this increased post-secondary education and allowed students 3 additional months to submit their FAFSA application. And due to this change, last year, we were limited in our ability on the dashboard to compare cycle weeks. However, because we are now in the second year of this October start date, we have true week-to-week comparisons available. And third, we've all been impacted by the hurricanes this past hurricane season, Irma and Maria. And talking with partners throughout the state, we've seen that FAFSA efforts have likely been delayed in their kickoff. And partners in working with families and students have also expressed difficulties trying to complete their application, issues such as loss of documents or required paperwork, which Amy spoke to a little bit about in her verification section. Additionally, Florida has seen an increase in student enrollment due to families migrating to our state from Puerto Rico and the Caribbean. It's been estimated that roughly 8,500 new students have entered Florida. And if you'd like to see more about the report from Tampa Bay Times that includes this data, FCAN did a synopsis on our blog, and you'll also find that in the handout. Now moving on to what you all came here for, the Florida FAFSA Challenge Dashboard. So the FAFSA Dashboard is a free resource that we offer on our website and includes data from 2 sources. The FAFSA completion data is provided from the U.S. Department of Education in a public file that's released every Friday. And our 12th grade enrollment data is obtained from the Florida Department of Education, and it comes from survey data that captures enrollment during the week of October 10th to October 14th. And as I mentioned, our dashboard is a free interactive resource that allows you to track your FAFSA completion at the state, county, and school level. And while you can use it to track FAFSA completions, it's also a great way to evaluate your current progress versus last year's efforts and identify trends. For example, looking at trend data from last year, there's likely a lull in our completions during the weeks between Thanksgiving and New Year's, as students and schools are typically closed for those holidays. The dashboard also allows you to generate a PDF that you can print and share with your colleagues, administrators, any donors or volunteers. And it's a great way to show the effect that your FAFSA efforts have made. Finally, last year we introduced a download all data option. We are very excited about increasing the availability of data to all of our partners. This feature allows you to download all of the data featured in our dashboard in a clean, user-friendly Excel spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet is updated weekly with the dashboard. Now we'll take a look at a few ways you can manipulate the dashboard to view FAFSA completion data. So the first feature that we want to highlight is the filtering. And one of the great ways is that you can filter it by county. So you can see on this screenshot that we filtered by Alachua, and the only schools that show are in Alachua School District. And you can also select more than one county if you work at a regional approach, or you can select the state if needed. The second is the filter by low income rate. A lot of our partners have expressed the need to compare peer-to-peer schools to see how they're doing compared to some of the schools that are like them or similar. And one of the ways you can do this is through the low income rate filter option. So this includes a toggle where you can change the low income rate at any school, and then the schools that are reflected will be within that range that you select. The last feature that we're going to highlight is the filter by number of 12th graders. Again, this is useful when you want to compare peer-to-peer schools. You obviously don't always want to compare a school that only has 100 12th graders to a school that has 600 12th graders. And this feature also, again, lets you toggle the amount of 12th graders in any school. You can write it in, as the toggle sometimes is hard to use for a few folks. And now we're going to take a look at last year's FAFSA cycle. The Florida FAFSA Challenge, as Amy mentioned, it runs from October to March. And as she mentioned, we do that for the reason that financial aid is a first come, first served basis, and we always encourage students to complete their FAFSA as early as possible. And hopefully you're all aware of the fantastic results of last year's challenge. As a state, we ended the challenge with a FAFSA completion rate of 34.1, and that's compared to the prior year at 25%. And this resulted in $37 million more in Pell Grants. And in the handouts that you can see on your side panel, we have linked a press release that FCAN released last year at the end of the FAFSA Challenge, and it also has the change in Pell Grant at the county level, so you can look that up and share it with your community. So while we've made great progress, we still have some work to do. Analysis of state-level data revealed that Florida ranks 34th among all states in FAFSA completion as of June 2017. However, we are third highest in year-to-year increase in FAFSA change. So clearly we were doing great work, but we still have a long way to go, especially when you take into account that Florida is the fourth highest in Pell eligible students. So there's a gap that we need to come together as a community to try and fill. So last week, the Florida Department of Education released preliminary enrollment data. Because this data is subject to change over the next few weeks, we are going to hold off on publishing our official Florida FAFSA Challenge dashboard and stick with our first look dashboard that you can see on the side of the screen here. But we do have some preliminary data that we can share. Before getting into these results, we should also note that we have seen an observed increase in 12th graders and that this may affect FAFSA completion rates. And this could happen for a few reasons. One is just a natural increase in population in Florida. And also, we know that we are getting folks migrating in as a result of the hurricanes. So as a state, Florida's FAFSA completion as of December 1st is 23.4%. As Amy mentioned earlier, a key way to increase FAFSA completion is to tackle that difference between submitted and completed FAFSAs. Currently, as a state, there are 5,763 students who have submitted a FAFSA but have not completed their FAFSA. Tackling this gap stands to increase the state's completion rate by up to 3 percentage points. And compared to last year at this time, almost 300 high schools are ahead in FAFSA completion as of December 1st this year. With that, there's also 57% of our school districts are ahead of FAFSA completion last year this time. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Amy as she introduces our next guest.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that great overview of FAFSA data. And we want to acknowledge as part of this webinar that every individual school and community has their own needs, so it's important for them to have custom goals that reflect their unique circumstances. And that's why we're honored to have Ralph Aiello here today, and he's going to speak about how Broward County has embraced the Florida FAFSA Challenge and adapted it to host their own version of the challenge in their county. And you'll also notice how Broward's take on the challenge shows how post-secondary institutions and other organizations can participate and boost FAFSA completion in their community. So with that,
all right, good morning, everybody. This is Ralph Aiello, Director of School Counseling and Brace Advisement for Broward County Public Schools. Brace Advisement is our Broward Advisors for Continuing Education. They are teacher's aides that are available in all of our high schools throughout the district who focus on college admissions and post-secondary enrollment. They're there as a support staff for our school counselors in order to meet the needs of the 6th largest school district in the United States. We have over 20,000 seniors alone, and when you add up all the high school students, we can fill Miami Dolphin Stadium with just high school students and still have 15,000 kids in the parking lot trying to get in. So definitely we'll need an army of people to meet the needs of all of those students to make sure that they all graduate, go on to some form of post-secondary education or employment, and get scholarships and financial aid to pay for it. We do have that small army. We have about 450 counselors and advisors in our district, but even with that said, we still need to have the village to raise the children. So throughout the presentation today, I'm going to emphasize that as school leaders, and I'm sure many of you out there on this call and webinar today are school-based leaders, that you need to mobilize your community. You'll never be able to hire enough counselors or advisors or get even parent volunteers at your school. You have to bring in a local college access network, to bring in the YMCAs and the Boys and Girls Club and the Children's Services Council, and get all hands on deck so everybody's working towards the same goals, speaking the same language, and using the same tools so we can get our kids the financial assistance they need. It just simply is too daunting of a task to do in isolation. It has to be a community effort. So on the screen right here is my small but mighty team. Myself, Carol Lopez, is our post-secondary specialist. Danny Trito handles our secondary schools, and Daniel Shapiro Elementary. I also have Raina Murray. She is on loan from our ESOL department and handles a lot of our bilingual counseling duties. And our website and Twitter handle and everything is on the screen in front of you. And all of our email addresses are going to be firstname.lastname@browardschools.com. Okay, next slide. All right, so on the screen right now, we mentioned several times about how the data comes from the U.S. Department of Education. This is not secret data, and it is free and available to the public. So if you go to the website that's at the bottom of the screen, there's where you can access all of the data for every single school in the entire country. You can search by the state of Florida, as well as the date range that you're looking at. Download it, and you'll have to do a little bit of filtering because it doesn't have it by county, but you'll have to probably, in large districts like ours, we have to look for it by state or by city to find all of our 30-something high schools that are participating in the FAFSA Challenge this year. But this does give you very good up-to-date information on a weekly or bi-weekly basis on the number of applications submitted as well as completed. And of course, it's simple math to just take your submitted minus the complete, and those are the ones that would be incomplete. And it was mentioned earlier, the incomplete students are probably where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, because those students have already expressed interest in completing their FAFSA. They've already taken a number of steps to start their FAFSA, but they probably don't even realize that they didn't complete it. So with just a little bit of help and a little bit of nudging and troubleshooting to find out where the incomplete status was, that's where you're going to be able to not leave a couple kids on the table that otherwise think that they're completed. So definitely want to recommend going to the U.S. Department of Education's website to get this data. Next slide. And as we just saw, this is the FCAN's First Look dashboard. In Broward, we're using this to kind of give our schools an indication of where they stand this year as opposed to last year, as well as giving them relative statistics compared to other schools and other districts. We like to compare ourselves and compete, and to make sure that we're always up there towards the top. So we want to make sure that our schools are aware of their status. Now, we don't really generally direct people to this dashboard, because as you're going to see in a minute, we download all this data, where you see in the bottom right hand corner for download all data, and we put this into our own systems to create our own rankings and our own data systems and visual displays, so we can have a Broward challenge, as was mentioned. So next slide. Ideally, we would be using the Office of Student Financial Affairs database, which is here, was mentioned earlier, where you have to have the data sharing agreement signed by your superintendent with the Florida Department of Education to get access to this, and it will show you whether or not your students have completed or submitted or have an incomplete application. One thing to keep in mind is that your students do have to apply for the FFAA, which is the Bright Futures application, in order to get the match for them to show on here. So a lot of our schools like to kind of do a surgical strike when it comes to getting students to fill out their Bright Futures applications. They think they know which ones are the qualifiers or close to qualifying, and they only have them apply. But when you do that, not only do those other students miss out on other potential scholarships besides Bright Futures, but we also are not able to do the match between their FFAA and their FAFSA. So one systemic change that we're trying to make in our schools is to get all students to apply for their FFAA as well as pursuing their FAFSA application. So that's something that you might want to work on at your school if you are that surgical strike, to try to do more of a shotgun blast and try to reach everybody for your FFAA. Another thing that is very limiting on this website is that it is read-only. So when you go onto this site, you can see all of your students and you can see their status, but you cannot download it. You can't even take a screenshot of it if you want to come back or do something else with it. It is purely a read-only screen. That is definitely limiting, especially as I mentioned, when you have 20,000 seniors that you're trying to manipulate the data on. So if anybody ever has any ability to help us get a download of that, we're certainly very welcoming to that assistance, because you're going to see in a moment how we would use this information. And next slide, which is particularly right here. So we in Broward are using Naviance as our college and career advisement system. Within Naviance, you're able to create programs. So we have created a program for 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th, 12th, and in those programs there are a list of tasks that we recommend for students in that particular grade level. So as an example, this is one from Houston Independent School District. Houston is the 7th largest school district, and they are doing phenomenal things out there when it comes to college and career readiness. And they've been using Naviance a few years longer than we have. So this is an example that they use, where you can assign students to do their FSAID, to apply for FAFSA, and so on and so forth. And when they do that, when they come in and show their SAR or their financial aid award letter or any documentation, the counselor or brace advisor can check off that it is completed. If we had the download from the Office of Student Financial Affairs on that student-by-student database, we would be able to use that Excel spreadsheet and upload it, so it wouldn't be a manual process. It would be an automated process for all students in the district, and we would be able to see truly student by student in our reports within Naviance who has and who has not completed the FAFSA or is incomplete. So this is just one way. So if you don't want to use the generic data from the U.S. Department of Education, then it kind of goes to the state of Florida, then it kind of goes into the, for FCAN, then it kind of goes into the school and student-by-student database. But if you truly want student by student, you have to have some form of a system like this, where you're truly capturing which students have shown you their documentation and which ones have not. Otherwise, the data sometimes can be a little off. So this is one that we're starting to pursue right now, and we're hoping that it's going to give us some more current as well as accurate data for all of our kids in all of our schools. Next slide. All right, but then we take it and we try to recalculate. As was mentioned, we were looking at the data in very fine tooth comb last year and noticed about it was only went for students who are 18. And when 20 to 25% of your students are 19 or older in your senior class, that certainly will throw off your data. The data now does go through the age of 19, but as we were running some reports the other day, we still have quite a number of 20-year-olds and plus in our school systems, whether that is in our traditional schools as well as our alternative centers, which both are important because when you combine traditional and alternative, that will give you your full district completion rate percentage. So we want to make sure that all students are receiving FAFSA services. And that would include students who are, behind their cohort. It might be over age, but they're still in our K-12 system, and we want to make sure that they're included. We also know that when the survey comes out from the October survey window, where we get the denominator for the completion rate formula, which tells you how many students were in your senior class, as you know, that changes every single day. And as the senior year goes on, it is a very high percentage of students that will transfer out of our schools. Maybe they go to alternative centers, maybe they go for private school, maybe they move out of the county, and unfortunately many of them do drop out. But wherever they go and whatever they do, they're still counting in your denominator in your completion rates. So the dashboards are not able to have live data like you would in your school or in your district. So in our dashboards, we use our nightly feed of our enrollment data as our denominator and use that with the numerator for student completions. So that's how we're recalculating, and we're omitting students that we know. If a school knows a student is undocumented or is special diploma. Now, special diploma students are all going to be standard diploma students now, so they're now going to be eligible for FAFSA. So that won't be as big of a reduction in the future. But for now, schools are able to eliminate some of those students that they know would not necessarily be FAFSA eligible. And there are a lot of families that are choosing to opt out, despite the fact that we try to dispel the myths of FAFSA, and we encourage everybody to apply. There are still many families that will ultimately choose to opt out of completing a FAFSA, some for good reasons, some for not so good reasons. I one time had a dad pull me to the side and say, just want to let you know that a lot of our income comes from sources that I would not necessarily want to report to the federal government. Or give them any inclination to look into my finances. So I'm going to choose not to do this. So I couldn't necessarily argue with him. So that was one that we extended the opportunity, but he ultimately opted out for his family. And on the next screen, we're also going to assume that all of these subtractions would equal to at least a 10% ineligible assumption. So we're never going to get 100%, but we're always going to shoot for probably around 90% is our target completion rate if we had the magic wand and everybody was able to apply who was eligible. And then for the next screens, when we considered the average Pell Grant award to be $3,611. So we took all that information and we tried to calculate, well, how much money are our students actually able to get for Pell Grants, and how many did they get, how much money did they get, and how much are we leaving on the table? So using that same information I just mentioned, using our final number of graduates that we knew walked across the stage and received their diploma, and 90% of those who would be eligible for FAFSA. We considered our free and reduced lunch rate, and that's what we used to consider that they were eligible for a Pell Grant. And then we just started to do some basic mathematics and did multiplication. And we came up with a possible value for Pell Grants at each of our schools, how much they got and how much they left on the table, so they can, and then we ranked them. Now that does, just because a school had a lot of Pell Grant money left on the table doesn't mean that that school did a poor job. In fact, on the example you're seeing on the screen right now, the top row all the way on the right for Miss Pell left over $500,000 on the table in Pell Grants. But they also got the most amount of Pell Grants of over $1 million. So we want to make sure we don't use the data to disparage schools. We want to focus on their positives and celebrate their successes while supporting them on what they have left to fill that gap and that void for their students. But this is something that definitely, when you bring dollar signs into the mix, people's eyes start to open a little wider and they start to pay attention a little bit more. And we've used this data right here in order to fill out a couple grant applications that we're hoping to receive in the near future. And in fact, one of those grant applications was a seed grant for our local college access network, our Broward Bridge to Life, which was through the Florida the Florida College Access Network gave us that, and we partner with our Children's Services Council and Urban League of Broward County. So this is great information. Anybody wants this, we can send you over the formulas that are in each of these cells. They're very, very simple. Everything I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. So it's something that no matter how math declined you think you are, this is very simple to do. All right, next slide. And then, so once our schools understood, how the data came about and how much money they were leaving on the table, we were asking schools to identify their own personal goals, their own goals for their school, after they omitted all students and so on and so forth. And in Broward, we developed a system called BASIS, which pretty much goes into our data warehouse and pulls a lot of critical information into a more user-friendly format where the user can sort and filter on a variety of different data fields. So in particular, we ask schools, look at your seniors who are on free and reduced lunch and have met a college-ready admissions assessment cut score. So the state of Florida identifies cut scores for reading, writing, and math to become eligible for college readiness. In the past, those kids who didn't get that cut score had to go in those remedial courses before they went on to the college courses. But now anybody who has a standard diploma can go right into college classes. It's just optional for those remedial classes. Well, we're still using that same criteria, those same cut scores, to identify students who have demonstrated academic skills to make them college ready. And if they find these students, 12th grade, free reduced lunch, college and career ready, those are the students you absolutely 100% should be targeting for FAFSA completion, because you know that they're capable of succeeding in college and you know that they have financial need. So it's definitely the students that you want to make sure have access to this financial aid opportunity at the very minimum. And then from there, they can build on it on top of that. Okay, next slide. And then we developed some extra dashboards. This is a BI, or Business Intelligence Dashboard. This is through our Microsoft 365 suite. So this is what we use for like email and calendars and things like that. Well, there's also another tool on here. I believe it's a couple dollars, like a $20 site license per person or something like that per person. But we take all that data that we downloaded out of the FAFSA Finish Line or the U.S. Department of Education or in Naviance or wherever we're pulling the data from, and we use these dashboards to show schools where they're at. What's their free reduced lunch rate? What's their completion rate as of now? What's their trend data? It's similar to the FAFSA Finish Line data, but again, it's using our own localized information for our current enrollments, allowing schools to opt students out of the challenge, and to use the U.S. Department of Education's or the Naviance data for that numerator. Next slide. And again, within BI Dashboard, showing them their growth over time, from one application window to the next. Again, shows you the school in a nice color, visually friendly way, whether or not they're showing growth. And we have a number of other dashboards that we have currently in development that will show them their goal and where they currently are, so they can see their progress towards that goal as well. So right now it's just telling them how many they have, but soon it will be their progress towards the goal. Right, next slide. And we have, every single school is asked to do at least one application drive during the regular school day or in the evening. At our college fairs, we have our FAFSA application drives, and we just received a Title IV grant as of probably 10 days ago. We just received this. So in the spring semester, we're going to be doing 11 FAFSA application drives throughout our communities. We have 3 zones, a north, a central, and a south, so we're going to do 3 in each. And then we're going to do 2 in my office because part of the grant was to be able to convert one of our classrooms or one of my offices into a FAFSA lab. So now we're going to have a full-time dedicated FAFSA lab, so parents and students can come by anytime they want during working hours or scheduled days days after school to do their FAFSA applications. We also have a number of different partners like College Summit, which trains our peers in order to help them run FAFSA campaigns on campus, as well as our community-based organizations through Broward Bridge to Life. And we also have partnerships with Broward College, where they have their Jumpstart program. So their recruiters and their advisors come to our schools, every single one of them, to help them not only complete their FAFSA, but also to apply for Broward College or any other college that they want to go to. So they also hold office hours at all 3 of their campuses throughout the district, all day, every day, as well as doing their own completion events in evenings and on the weekends. Next. And we mentioned free resources a lot. This is just another one from the US DOE. The reason why I like this one a lot is because you can search for the type of resource it has. You want to do a presentation, you want a handout, who's the audience, is it parents, is it students, is it community members, and you want to learn about Pell Grants, you want to learn about student loans, whatever it is, and you can get amazing resources here. When we put on the college fair in October, we had over 6,000 participants. We requested tens of thousands of documents and the materials from this website, and they sent everything. So your offices can absolutely be overflowing with information, that you can get off of this site, as well as from FCAN, OSFA, or local banks even. Wells Fargo donated information, Bank of America, and many others. So definitely the resources are available for your offices. Next. And professional development. The key is you can have all these events, you can do all these, get all these materials and have all this data, but if you don't have people helping people to fill out the applications, then you're not really going to increase your completion rates very well. So we've partnered with Broward College and the University of Miami, DOE, and even USpire, a nonprofit out of Massachusetts, to come and do professional development for our counselors, advisors, but now putting a major focus on those community partners through Bridge to Life. We want to make sure that when students go to their after-school programs, or they're going on the weekends, or they're going to their church group, or wherever they're going outside of the school, that some mentor, some advisor, somebody at those programs is able to assist them with the FAFSA completions. So we're trying to build the Brace Army to help everybody complete these applications. And then if you can't build your own army, there is an army of people out there, as mentioned earlier, through the Speakers Bureau, where you can request support, or you can just contact your local institutions, and no doubt they're going to be willing to help you. Just in Broward, when you're trying to put on 30, 40, 50 FAFSA events in a school year, we try to build capacity so we could do it ourselves, because otherwise we draw upon our partners a little bit too much, and that hurts their ability to support us in the way they want. And as part of the Title IV grant, we're going to train over 64 staff, as well as probably another 30-something community partners. For about 100 people will eventually be trained on FAFSA completion, so we can call upon them at any time. Additionally, we got in a volunteer grant, so we're going to train probably about 50 volunteers from the community on FAFSA completions to help at these events. But we're also going to train people to not work the events, but how to market the events. Because one of the main things that we do is, you can send letters home, you can put something on your website, you can even do a robocall. But when you have a person-to-person phone call that expresses the the potential of somebody's child and their ability to be successful in college, and that you believe that you can help them to acquire the financial aid to pay for that education, you get tears on the other side of that phone, and you can almost guarantee that they're going to show up with a smile at your FAFSA completion event. So never underestimate the personal touch when it comes to marketing. So we're going to recruit volunteers and train them on how to make these calls and make these personal connections, and how to recruit people to attend our events. Okay, and next slide. Yep, and so here are just some of those digital communications, just like in the toolkits, we have websites, we have SharePoint sites where we put all of our resources and materials for staff. We have our parent links and email, so we do phone calls, text messages, emails, any way we possibly can. And of course, as I just mentioned, make personal contact. If you can't do it yourself, try to recruit a secretary or a volunteer or somebody to help with that personal contact, because it makes a world of difference. Next slide. And the last thing that this is our pilot for this year. You know, oftentimes we can't get the people to come to us. So even if we you know, make that personal phone call and we have food at our event, sometimes you even have daycare at your events. You try to do it in the weekends, or you try to do it in the evenings, and you do it all over the county, or whatever it is. People still can't seem to make it to your event. So this year what we're going to do is, another reason we would love to have an Excel spreadsheet download of our student-by-student database is we're going to take our information and put it in a spreadsheet, and we're uploading it into a geomapping software like Google Maps. And on the map, we're going to see little dots, green dots for completed, red dots for not completed, and probably yellow for incomplete. And we're placing them on the map. And we're going to find where the center of gravity is for all of these students who have not completed the FAFSA, and they tend to, you know, cluster in our most impoverished communities. And then we're going to borrow the Title I bus. They just created a mobile unit, which it has wireless access, and it has laptop carts and things like that. And we're literally going to roll that bus right into that center of gravity in those communities, find a shopping center or a recreational hall or a church or wherever we can set up shop, and we're going to invite people and start knocking on doors and having them come to our mobile unit right there in their community. So again, if they can't come to you, bring your show on the road and try to get as many FAFSA completions as you can, because I guarantee you the majority of your families that you need to complete are probably huddled in a very small geographic area, and you'll find much greater results in their community than them coming to you. And I think that was it.
All right, Ralph, thank you so much for that awesome overview. And for all of you who are listening, we are going to have the resources available to you. The handouts are there right now, and we're also going to send out an email to you after this webinar is over with the resources in them. That email is also going to include a brief survey for you to give us feedback on how we did. We'll use that to help improve our webinars in the future. So if you would please take the time to fill that out. I also want to take a minute to remind everyone that we have our Florida College Access Network Summit coming up this May. It's going to be the 10th and 11th. That's a Thursday and a Friday at the Hyatt Regency in Orlando. We're going to have sessions on college access, affordability, success, and completion. I'm going to be doing a session with some partners, folks just like Ralph from across the state who do college application and FAFSA and college decision day events, so you can come and hear from them. There's going to be some other folks talking about affordability and how people pay for college, so there's going to be some really great information at the summit. And then I also want to remind everyone that there's still time to register for the Florida FAFSA Challenge. And there's the link right there at floridacollegeaccess.org/takeaction partner initiatives. And schools can register for the Florida FAFSA Challenge. Districts can register. The entire district of Broward County is registered for the Florida FAFSA Challenge. Post-secondary institutions can register for the Florida FAFSA Challenge. LCANs can register, and community organizations can register. We have Boys and Girls Clubs. We have community centers. So all kinds of organizations register. If you're not sure whether your organization is the kind that should register, feel free to shoot me an email, and we can talk about that. A lot of folks ask us, why should we register for the FAFSA Challenge if we can have access to these resources without registering? Well, when you register, you get the latest updates from us, and it helps us to track our progress across the state and to connect those who are participating in the challenge with the best resources that they need. So we do ask folks that are participating to just let us know and help us to work together to boost FAFSA completion across the state. So with that, we're going to open up some time to answer some questions that we've received during the webinar, and I'm going to hand that over to Kimberly.
First off, I have to say, Ralph, you've gotten raving reviews from the members who are on this call. And as FCAN, we're so impressed with the work that you have done. So one of the questions that we have is about the Bright Futures application and the difference between that and the FAFSA application. So it looks like a counselor has messaged us and asked that most of her students have applied for Bright Futures, which does not require a Social Security number, but she she has an abnormally high number of students listed as needing a social security number. This data is from the OSFA website. So it looks like, hold on one second. So hello, can everyone hear me now? All right. There we go. So Ralph, I just want to say that you received great reviews from everyone who's on the call right now. And at FCAN, we are super impressed with all the work that Broward County has done. It looks like we do have one question from a counselor asking about the difference between Bright Futures application and the FAFSA. So it says that her school, there's a lot of students are listed as needing a social security number in their FAFSA. That means that they would be listed as submitted and not completed. However, she has a higher rate of Bright Futures applications completed at her school. So again, to note, those are two separate applications. You do not have to complete the FAFSA to get a Bright Futures application as well. So when you're looking, when anyone out there is looking at the difference between their submitted and completed FAFSAs, those are likely accurate. And again, they really are separate from the Bright Futures application. And again, a few folks have asked if this is going to be recorded and shared. Yes, it will. We will send that out to you when we are done. And I personally have one question for Ralph Kimberly. So again, we are just so impressed by the work that Broward has done. And it's also easy, I think, for some folks on the line to be a little overwhelmed seeing all the progress that you have made. But we know that the route to success is not linear, and I'm sure that you all had some bumps along the road. Are there any lessons that you can share with everyone on the line from either areas where you struggle or high successes, but just to get some more of that information out there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I honestly thought 2-3 years ago that it would be a lot easier to give away free money. And it just hasn't proven to be that easy. You know, when it comes to our school systems, you know, and getting our counselors and our BRACE advisors on board as much as they want to, there are an unknown number of competing initiatives that are out there that are dragging them away from this type of activity. It helped a lot this past year when the application window opened in October rather than January 1st, because, you know, once we get into the spring semester, testing season started to really take up a lot of their time. So that gave them that extra window to put on events and to focus on this. And that's why, you know, I stressed at the beginning that we really have to engage our community partners. You know, I've actually found our community partners to even be more willing than our school-based partners to engage in this type of activity. So I strongly recommend to get the Coalition of the Willing in your communities, whether they're community-based organizations, they're higher education institutions, government, business partners, the PTA, whoever it is, to assist with this, because it takes a lot of time, energy, and it's not so easy.
Thanks for sharing that, Ralph. And we have one more question before we have to wrap it up that Amy's going to handle.
All right, so I had a great question about if you're a post-secondary institution that covers more than one county, how do you register for the Florida FAFSA Challenge that way? I would say, I imagine that most post-secondary institutions that cover more than one county have a main campus in one county, and if that's the case for you, to register under that county. If that's not the case, if you really are just in multiple counties equally, just pick one of them and then shoot me an email letting me know what other counties you're in, and I can input that manually. And I'll also keep that in mind. If we have that request coming up a lot in the future, I'll change the form for next year to have a comment box where people can put in that information. So thank you for making me aware of that. All right, and it seems like that is all the questions we have, and that's just about all the time we have. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us this morning. Again, we're going to be shooting out an email with the resources that we had available on this presentation. We're going to have a short survey for you to complete to give us some feedback that we really appreciate if you can take the time to fill out. And we'll also have the recording of this webinar available. So thank you again for joining us this morning, and everyone have a great, great holiday.